Hello everyone, how are you all doing? So today we are gonna see, what if Naruto x Yugito, part 3, hope you enjoy the video, let's start the video. Yosh. My youthful students. Today we begin your rigorous training with me. Now I want you to put these on and to run around Konoha 10 times. Hearing this, both Naruto and Yugito's eyes were bulging out of their heads when he pulled out weights that caused small craters on the ground. All three of the other sweat dropped at this before Anko walked up to him and slapped Guy on the back of the head. I'm not sure about Yugito, but I know for a fact a 6-year-old can't possibly do that. And for the love of Kami. I doubt some jounin could wear that much weight constantly, much less 2 children. I nodded and went into a thinking pose as Anko sighed and pulled out some weights that were much lighter she bought just for this occasion and handed them to the two. Once they put them on, Guy spoke up again, and when I said spoke, I mean screamed. Alright. I want you run 50 laps around this training grounds and then. The other three couldn't help but sigh as they turned him out but felt pity for the two. They had a feeling that Naruto would be wishing for another beating while Yugito would willingly jump off the Hokage monument when Guy was finished with them. Around a few hours later, the two weren't in the best of conditions. You might wonder why, but it was quite simple. After finishing with Guy's extreme training, Yugito was currently clinging to a tree for dear life while Naruto was having a nice visit with his old friend, the ground. It didn't help that both were covered head to toe in dirt and bruises and their muscles were strained from the weights Anko had given them. Once she had semi-recovered, Yugito glared at the green abomination with all the hatred she could muster. 50 laps followed by 500 push UPS and sit UPS. 500 punches and kicks to the training dummies for each limb including my head. And then he wanted us to practice tree jump with this weight on. Is this man human? Nibi decided to answer for the sake of Yugito's sanity. Kitten, you don't want that to be answered. If the truth was to be said, Nibi was afraid of the green spandex wearing man if this was what he called a light workout. Naruto currently wasn't thinking about anything at the moment other than the bright white light in front of him. He was mesmerized by it and started to slowly walk towards it. Suddenly Kyuubi appeared next to him. Kid. Do not go into the light. His response was so comical that it would have normally made her laugh. So pretty. I have to touch it. Kyuubi's sweat dropped before grumbling as she used her tails to restrain Naruto from reaching his goal. Yugao walked up and saw the condition the two were in and sweat dropped at the scene. Guy, what did you do to them? Asked Yugao in slight fear as she noticed the condition of both of them. Guy was about to respond when she interrupted him. Never mind. Don't answer that. After giving Naruto and Yugito a soldier pill, blood pill, some painkillers, and waiting 2 hours for them to recover, Anko began her session of training, as Yugao said she would start teaching them once they got used to Guy's training and the fact that her time was already up. Alright. I'll be training you in chakra control today. So we'll begin with tree walking. She would have shown them how to do it when Naruto decided to start and just ran up the tree. When he got halfway up, his foot slipped and he fell to the ground, head first. Anko sighed as she caught his foot as his head was inches from hitting the ground. Alright, let's try that again, but this time try to flip in midair so you don't land on your head. Naruto nodded as she let him go as Yugito walked up before rushing up the tree. She made it a little higher than Naruto when she slipped and flipped in midair and landed on all fours like a cat would. Anko could refrain from smirking at this. Well, at least one of them has grace. She thought this was because Naruto was the same height as Yugito and slipped once more and landed on his butt. She shook her head before turning to Yugito. So I'm guessing they had already taught you this in Kumo. She nodded at her before rushing up the tree again. They continued practicing this until 2 hours when they stopped and looked at Anko, apparently waiting for Kakashi. After about 5 minutes, Yugito spoke. Anko-san, isn't Kakashi-san supposed to train us as well? Anko sighed as she waited for the ever-late copy-nin before sighing. Just give him a few minutes. In a puff of smoke, Kakashi appeared with his eyes in upside-down U's. Sorry for being late, I had to help an old woman cross the street before buying the latest edition of my favorite book series. Anko's sweat dropped and was in shock. Kakashi had actually told the truth for once in his life. He smirked seeing this before speaking. Well, since Anko has been teaching you tree walking, I want you to continue it for the rest of the day or till you learn it. At this, Naruto raised an eyebrow as Yugito asked what he was thinking. Okay. But aren't you supposed to teach us ninjutsu? He nodded at her question before answering. True, but having better chakra control makes learning easier. Therefore I want you to have better control and higher reserves before I start tutoring you. The Nico vessel nodded her head as it made sense as Naruto just shrugged his shoulders before resuming running up the tree as he wanted to start learning some jutsu to defend himself. Anko nodded at Kakashi before he took control of the training session. Meaning he was reading his new Icha Paradise as he pointed out what they were doing wrong every couple of minutes. After about an hour and a half, he stopped them as Anko reappeared in the training grounds. She turned to the painting before smiling at Kakashi after saying goodbye. Gaki. You go, and I have restocked your fridge. All you had was ramen and you needed other kinds of food. Plus we got a few things for you as well, Yugito. Naruto shrugged as he really didn't care, but if they got rid of his ramen, he would come after with the power of 1,000 supernovas. Well, Yugito nodded as she was slightly happy to hear that there was other food than the strange noodles. All three of them walked off and headed towards the apartments. Once they arrived, Anko dropped them off at their room. Alright, see you tomorrow and don't do anything that I wouldn't do. She said, hinting at something that only the two had caught while the two looked confused as to what that meant. Sighing, Yugito walked to her room and headed to the bathroom. She quickly looked at the doors to make sure Naruto could walk in on her and pulled off her clothes as she wanted to take a bath. Unfortunately for her, the door suddenly unlocked itself as Naruto walked in as he needed to take a bath as well. Suddenly both tensed as they stared at the other while a certain purple hair was laughing her ass off as she hit herself with a cloaking and silencing. She was glad that she unlocked the door as this was better than torturing poor Iruka. Yugito just stared at Naruto in shock as she was topless at the moment. Of course Naruto was 6 and really didn't care about this, he was just trying to figure out why she was suddenly picking up anything she could and started throwing it at him. Get out of here, you little prick. I'm trying to take a bath here. Naruto dodged the object she threw at him and was beginning to wonder why she was acting like this when his eyes widened seeing a large object being thrown at him. Holy shit. How did she manage to get the kitchen sink? Ayubi sweat dropped as she would have berated Naruto on walking in on a girl in the bathroom, but she was currently like Anko. Laughing her ass off. Seeing the sink being thrown at him, Naruto rushed out of the room not wanting to irritate the girl anymore. He shook his head as he walked to the kitchen. I wonder what that was all about. And what were those weird lumps on her chest? I'll have to ask Kasen about those later. From within him, Kyuubi suddenly stopped laughing and her eyes went wide as she tried to find an excuse to get around explaining to him the birds and the bees. A few weeks later, Yugito was getting irritated. Today they had the day off since only Anko was available, but she got called by Ibiki, so she cancelled their training for the day. She could deal with that, but the fact that today was a holiday, so they gave Naruto strict orders to stay inside. So she was kind of pissed that she had to watch over him, not that he needed her. It was just common courtesy to do so, as he was still a child. And then add the fact that no matter how much she tried to get him to talk, he would only respond with 1, maybe 2 words at the most. Yugito herself wasn't a talkative person, but damn it she wanted to know more about him. So she was going to find out one way or another. So she walked behind Naruto, who was currently blankly looking out the window at Yugito. Sensing this, he turned around and noticed that she was looking at him with the same irritated expression of Anko's and her arms crossed in front of her chest. He shrugged his shoulders before turning back, not really caring. The tick mark grew on Yugito's head and she could no longer control herself. She quickly grabbed his collar and yanked him into the air. Oh damn it. Where is the damn on switch for speech? Why would you want to talk to me? Naruto spoke stoically, surprisingly older, as she let go of him. He hit the floor and grumbled about people dropping him. She quickly regained her composure. Well, since we will be living with each other for at least the next couple of years, I figured that we should at least get to know each other. Naruto shrugged, as he really didn't care. Nothing to know about me. Yugito restrained from strangling him before sighing as she sat down next to him and looked out the window. It was then she noticed what he was looking at. He was watching the children playing on the street below with their parents smiling at their antics. Her face dropped seeing this. She never really did have much of a childhood. Her mother died when she was young and Tenchi never really let her be a child when he took care of her. She really never had the time to grieve for her mother's death as she was put into an intense training almost immediately after. A small teardrop fell from her eyes before she got up and quickly rushed out of the room. Leaving a bewildered Naruto, trying to figure out what just happened. What was that about? He shrugged before turning back to the kids on the street and sneered at them. He quickly turned away and sat on the small couch that was brought in and turned on the TV that Anko had bought for them. A few moments later, he could hear sounds coming from Yugito's room. Listening closer to them, he could tell that it was her and that she was crying. This bewildered him even more as he stood up and went to check on her. He wouldn't admit it, but he kind of enjoyed her company as she felt familiar. It was as if she felt like him. He shook that off as he walked up to the door and opened it as he was never taught anything about manners. In her room, Yugito was laying on her bed with her head buried in a pillow. She curled up into herself as the tears started falling faster. Her muffled sobs grew louder and louder by the second. Nibi could only watch as her container cried her heart out. She knew this was long overdue and was about to pull her into her mind when the door opened to reveal a slightly curious Naruto. Hearing her door open, Yugito looked up a bit to see Naruto before burying her head back in the pillow. Go away. At this, Naruto was even more confused. Ignoring her comment, he walked over to her and examined her state. A small part of his old self returned as she seemed to be like he was after one of his beatings, and he sat on the bed and did the only thing he could think of. He rubbed the middle of her back, hoping it would help calm her down. Yugito stiffened at his touch as it was foreign for both of them. She could tell he was trying to comfort her, but this was strange. These past couple of weeks he rarely acted out of anything, much less compassion. So why was he doing so now? Because the kitten, believe it or not, has gotten somewhat attached to you. Think about it, he's cold to everyone, but to you, the snake woman, the weapon lady, the one-eyed pervert, and oddly enough the green creature that gives me nightmares, he treats you differently. It's as if you five are his family, even if he doesn't show it. She blinked in surprise hearing her tenant speak up and actually making sense. She looked over at Naruto and into his eyes. They were still emotionless for the most part, but the emotions they did show were pain, suffering, loneliness and compassion. A light smile appeared on her face as she wiped the tears from her face. Thank you, Naruto. HN. Was his simple response as he had accomplished what he needed to do before walking out of the room, leaving Yugito with a light smile still on her face. Maybe the real him that they talked about is still there. Just buried underneath his pain. She wiped the remaining tears from her face and walked out of the room to see Naruto watching a gory anime with lots of bloodshed. She shook her head and sighed. Then again, it's probable that it's just a once-in-a-while thing. Yugito sighed before seating herself in a comfortable position on the couch and watching the bloodbath anime with Naruto actually smiling. She shivered seeing that and edged away from the slightly psycho. Early the next morning, Naruto woke up due to the sun rays hitting his eyes. He mumbled something about destroying the sun before putting on his normal attire with his weights before he headed for the kitchen to make breakfast, somewhat happy Yugito wasn't up and making it. As the last few times that happened he nearly choked to death as he tried to muscle his way through the horrible taste. After boiling the water and devouring his customary 3 cups of ramen, he noticed that Yugito hadn't woken up yet. He was wondering if he should just leave her here and head off without her, but thought against it and didn't want to wait for her to get there. He walked to her room and opened to see that she was currently sleeping up in a ball drooling. Slightly disgusted by this fact, he pulled out a stick from Your Guess As Good As Mine and started poking her with it. With a loud growl, Yugito grabbed the stick and snapped it in two. She slowly sat up as she let her eyes adjust to the light before focusing on Naruto's form. He would have walked out, but something told him to stay besides Kyuubi telling him to pull out and take a picture. A tick mark developed on her forehead as she noticed Naruto staring at her, and the fact that she was barely wearing anything other than her nightgown made her uneasy about the situation. She would have screamed for him to get out when he spoke. We got training today, so hurry up. Yugito's eyes widened as she looked at the clock and cursed loudly before nodding at him. As he turned around to leave the room, she suddenly spoke up. Naruto, how does it feel to be alone without any parents? Naruto stopped dead in his tracks and turned back around and glared at Yugito, who was sitting up on the edge of her bed. After a moment's pause, she began to squirm under his stone glare. She was about to tell him to forget about it when he responded. It was difficult. I never had anyone other than the Hokage Jiji, old man Ichiraku, his daughter, Nico-san, Tora-san, Inu-san, Green Man, and Psycho Lady ever care for me. Everyone else just treated me like an outcast. Yugito nodded as she had figured this much out already. So, just because you hold Kyuubi the rest of the village sees you as a plague. Naruto stiffed as she mentioned his Kasan and hissed at her. How do you know about her? Yugito sighed as she stood out of bed and walked over to him. Let's see, you talk out loud to someone that isn't visibly there, zone out at times, and you don't notice anything around you when you do. I figured it out after being given enough hints and the fact that we are the same. I am just like you. Naruto's eyes went wide hearing the last comment. He backed away in shock as he looked at her. But he wasn't afraid, it was just pure shock. Why you're like me. Yugito walked over to him and kneeled in front of him and looked him dead in the eye before smiling lightly. Yes. I have Nibi no Nekomata, the two-tailed hellcat. After getting over the shock she had put him in, Naruto looked at her and was about to speak when a loud voice that frightened him beyond all reason was heard. Akis. Get the hell out of here. We have training to do. Or do you want to have to go through guys training all day? Needless to say, Yugito magically put her clothes on within a second and they rushed out of her room, not wanting to train with that man all day. The day passed quickly as they only trained with Anko and Guy, as both Kakashi and Yuga were in the same Anbu squad and the squad was out on a mission and shouldn't be back for a couple more days. As they finished their anatomy lesson, which both Naruto and Yugito were heavily blushing by the end of the day, as she decided to go over the birds and the bees with them, Naruto turned around and headed towards town. I need to think. I'm going to wander around for a little while. Anko quickly turned around hearing this. Hell no, have you forgotten that tomorrow he wasn't there? She looked around and didn't see him anywhere nearby and was wondering how he managed to get away so quickly. She gritted her teeth before turning back to Yugito. Take the south side, I'll take the north. Yugito nodded and took off. Anko quickly jumped onto a roof as she began searching for him while mentally cursing him out. Damn it. When he doesn't want to be found, it's a bitch and a half trying to find him. In the slums on the south side of the city, Naruto was currently walking towards his old apartment. This was the poverty-stricken district of Konoha, and it was mostly vacant due to the fact that he had lived there until just recently. Spreading out his senses, he noted that he was being followed by a few drunks, but really didn't care. He could handle a few of them, he just hoped that they didn't go get more people to join in. He could handle a few, but he guessed that he was about as strong as most average academy students were. Kyuubi had already known they had been there for a while, and one of them had already left, so she was trying to convince her vessel to leave. Kid, I think we should go back. There, Naruto shook his head, mentally interrupting her. Not yet. I want to clear my head out first. Kyuubi growled at him and sent some into him to try and alert a few nearby shinobi that things were about to get ugly since her vessel was being stubborn again. As he was zoned out, Naruto bumped into someone. He quickly looked up and saw a pink-haired woman grinning evil as she noticed him, and he was surrounded by a mob of at least 20 people. He mentally cursed that he didn't listen to his cause, and when the woman spoke. Well. Look what we have here. The demon thinks he can walk around freely like he owns the place. I think it's time we teach you a lesson. Hearing this, Naruto began to search for an escape route and quickly found one. He dashed towards the alley, jumping over a few surprised villagers before heading into it. They quickly recovered and gave chase, much to his dismay. He started to pray to whatever supreme deity that was looking on that this alley wasn't a dead end. Unfortunately, they had forsaken him once more, as it was exactly that. Looking around, he notices the only escape was to use his training over the past couple of weeks. He jumped up into the air and landed on the wall and started to run up the wall and made it to the top, only to notice that there was a shinobi wearing a vest with silver hair waiting for him. He gave an evil smirk before he attempted to grab Naruto. Naruto had other plans as he went through a few hand seals as he managed to get away from the man's grasp. Pain. Housenkan no Jutsu. He breathed in deeply and released it, sending 5 small fireballs towards the unsuspecting. The shinobi wasn't expecting this and took the front of the attack. Naruto quickly passed him as it was meant to be a distraction, but to his horror was grabbed by the same. Not getting away that easy. His eyes widened as he was thrown back towards the awaiting mob. He gritted his teeth as he went through every possible scenario his young brain could go through, and none of them ended well for him. Closing his eyes, he prepared for the beating that was about to happen when he hit the ground. But he didn't, as he felt someone catch him. As Naruto was feet from hitting the ground, a black and white blur suddenly caught him and landed on the opposing wall before rushing up it, leaving a stunned crowd as they had no clue what had just happened. The silver-haired snarled and gave chase with a few of those that were in the mob following, as well. Opening his eyes, Naruto looked up and noticed that Yugito was the one that caught him. His eyes widened seeing this, and looking back he could see that the shinobi of the mob were in hot pursuit. He wasn't the only one to notice, as she had as well, and started to push chakra into her legs. She gritted her teeth as she could tell she was gaining on her. Trying to go over her options on what to do now, they had caught them and backhanded her into a wall of the nearby alley. Naruto skidded across the roof and he grabbed the sides of it to keep from falling. It wasn't to be, as he fell to the ground, landing feet first. He refrained from screaming as something snapped when he hit the ground and fell to the ground clutching his left leg. Looking around the alley, he noticed Yugito was semi-conscious as she laid against the wall. Then his eyes narrowed as he along with the 3 jumped into the alley. Hey, Mizuki-sensei. Can I be the first to beat him? The on the far right said with glee in his voice. Mizuki smirked before nodding. Sure, but since neither of them can move, I think we should teach the girl a lesson for interfering. Right, guys? All 3 of them smirked at this as 2 of them grabbed Yugito while the other picked up Naruto. He gripped the back of his neck and forced him to watch them tear off Yugito's clothes. His eyes widened realizing what was going to happen before anger began to swell inside him, remembering the same happening to him almost 2 years ago. Uzumaki quickly got behind the girl as Yugito's eyes widened when he pressed his average-size member against her. It was at this moment Naruto let his anger consume him. He gritted his teeth in rage as he began to pull out Kyuubi's. Memories of what happened to him on that fateful day began to flash through his eyes as he began to push the head inside her. Suddenly the last memory hit him and he could remember the man's face, it was the same. His blood began boiling as Kyuubi began giving her tenant as much as he could handle. But something happened that she wasn't prepared for, he was calling out more than he could handle. In an instant red exploded from him, burning that held him. It swirled violently around him as it slowly began to meld with him while his broken leg healed in a grotesque display. His eyes turned crimson as his iris became dilated. His fingers lengthened into claws as his whisker marks thickened. His fangs grew longer and harder. Then to everyone's horror they began to take a shape. It was that of a fox, but instead of 9 or even 1 tail, there were 2 waving madly behind him. And a third was beginning to grow. Blood began to seep out of his pores and mix with as his body wasn't able to handle the amount of that he was putting out. He opened his eyes to reveal 2 crimson eyes with tears of blood streaking down his face. Bloodlust and killing intent washed over the Konoha Shinobis and they felt fear as Naruto looked at them madly, wanting their blood. I was giving Sarutobi a briefing on how the training went for the week with Yamato in the room when they felt a strong pulse of Kyuubi chakra. All of their eyes widened, feeling the amount, and knew Naruto was in deathly trouble if he was using this much. All 3 shot out of the room with speeds unseen even with the Sharingan. Anko was jumping from roof to roof, looking for the annoyance that she considered a younger brother and sometimes even her son. Then she felt it. The large amount of Kyuubis. Her eyes widened in recognition and raced towards the pulse at full speed, hoping he was alright and was ready to tear the ones attacking him limb from limb. Both Kakashi and Yugao had just arrived early from their squad's mission when they felt the pulse. Yugao took off at full speed, forgetting to check in with the guards, while Kakashi threw his ID before racing after her. Shit. Isn't he supposed to have someone with him at all times when he goes into the village? Yugao thought in distress as she and an equally worried Kakashi rushed towards the pulse. Around the village, the villagers and shinobi started to have the dreaded feeling they had 6, almost 7 years ago, as the bloodlust and killing intent that the Kyuubi Jinchuriki was putting out washed over them in waves. Naruto looked at the one that was about to enter Yugito and snarled viciously. His killing intent spiked tremendously as he hunched over on all 4s. In an instant he had blurred out of their vision and the sound of flesh being ripped through was heard. Blood splattered on Yugito's bare skin as the 2 let go of her as 4 large gashes appeared on their necks before they fell to the ground, lifeless. Uzumaki quickly jumped away from Yugito and was about to run away as he was afraid of Naruto. The young boy never put up any fights before, but now this was petrifying. He tried to run off, but suddenly a clawed hand pierced the center of his chest. He looked back to see Naruto's bloodthirsty eyes glaring at him with satisfaction. His fear doubled as Naruto lifted him into the air like a doll before he started to slash Mizuki's face, leaving large gash marks. He then quickly moved to his left arm and ripped it off with ease. He pulled out his arm out of his chest before slashing through his spine. Mizuki screamed in pain as he fell to the ground and started to twitch madly as a blood pool began to form around him. Naruto smirked seeing him before placing his boot on his and concentrating the flowing through him to his foot. In an instant, his skull cracked and flattened as Naruto crushed it. His brain splattered over Naruto and the nearby Yugito in a gruesome display. Yugito shivered uncontrollably as she saw this. This wasn't him. This was a monster. Yet she couldn't hold it against him. If in his position, she would be doing the same. These men, no scum, didn't deserve to live. She unconsciously began to call on Nibis as Naruto turned to the final shinobi. The young man was frightened, scratch that. He was terrified beyond what was believed to be physically possible. The crotch of his pants was soaked as he had lost control of his bladder and the smell around him indicated the same happened with his bowels. Naruto snarled viciously at the boy and in an instant he was on him. He gripped the Jennings arms before pulling with everything he had and ripped them out of their sockets. The boy apparently didn't feel anything as he just looked on with Naruto in unimaginable terror. With a quick kick, the boy was on the ground and Naruto pulled his hand back for the death blow when he heard a whisper behind him as 2 arms covered in blackish purple wrapped around his chest. Naruto. Please stop. This isn't like you. He looked behind him to see a slightly frightened yet sincere Yugito. Yes, she was frightened seeing what the young boy did, but she didn't care as he did it for her safety. Seeing her for a reason Naruto couldn't explain calmed him down. Kyuubi started to slowly dissipate from his system. With a lightened amount of bloodlust and killing intent, the armless passed out as the pain hit him like a 1-ton truck. As they completely left him and Nino's left hers, Naruto passed out from blood loss. Yugito gripped him tightly, her eyes wide in fear as she saw the amount of blood covering him and she could smell that it was his. She didn't know how it happened, but she would have had to guess it had to be him using nearly triple the amount of his body could handle. She fell to her knees as she was tired herself, yet didn't let go of Naruto and held him closely to her. It was at this moment Anko, Guy, Kakashi, Sarutobi and Yugao along with other shinobi arrived to see the horrifying aftermath of Naruto's rage. Blood was splattered over the walls and the two children, but Naruto was soaked in it and it seemed to be his blood. All the kunoichi there instantly noticed Yugito's state and the fact that he with a crushed skull had his member in plain sight. Both Anko and Yugao had to rein in their killing intent to keep from scaring everyone, mainly the two younglings. Anko quickly jumped down with intent on finishing the final when Guy and Kakashi stopped her. "Let me go. I'll fucking kill him." Both elites held onto her tightly, not giving her the chance. Kakashi, seeing they were failing to keep her from doing so, opted to calm her down. "Anko. Calm down. I'm feeling the same, but we need to know what happened. Then you can finish the job." Anko reasoning hurted, but her maternal instincts had taken over and she really didn't care. Kakashi sighed as he chopped the back of her neck, knocking her unconscious. While this was happening, Yugao had jumped down and her eyes widened at the sight of Naruto. His pores were bleeding heavily and at this rate, not even Kyuubi could heal him. "We need to get Naruto to the hospital now." Both Yamato and Sarutobi jumped down and nodded quickly seeing Naruto's state. Yamato tried to pick Naruto up but Yugito snarled at him as she gripped him tighter. Yugao tried reasoning with a young blonde-haired girl but all she got in response was her snarling. Sighing, she hit a pressure point in the back of her neck and knocked her out. Seeing this, Yamato quickly grabbed Naruto and went to the hospital. Sarutobi turned to Guy and Kakashi who had heard the whole thing before speaking. "Kakashi, take him to the hospital and assign one of your subordinates to watch him till we can send him to Ibiki. Guy, take Anko home. We don't need her at the hospital right now. Yugao, take Yugito-chan to the hospital on the double." All three nodded as they left the area with their respective charges. Sarutobi sighed, he was really getting too old for this shit. Thanks for watching my video, sayonara.